In a world that often celebrates freedom and justice, there is a painful truth that remains hidden in plain sight. Why are millions of people still silenced? Why are human rights treated like luxuries instead of basic necessities? Why, in the year 2025, are so many still living under oppression and fear? Welcome to Black Voice USA, the platform where untold stories find their power. Here, we shine light on truth, expose injustice, and give voice to the unheard. From struggles to strength, from silence to impact, this is Black Voice USA. Africa in 2025 stands at a critical crossroads. On one side, there is undeniable progress, technological growth, a young generation filled with energy, and nations striving to modernize. But on the other side, there lies a darker reality, widespread human rights violations that continue to stain the continent's future. These violations are not isolated incidents. They are patterns repeated across multiple countries, fueled by corruption, weak governance, ethnic conflicts, and power-hungry leaders who put their interests above the people. Political repression remains one of the most glaring realities. In several nations, governments silence critics with intimidation, imprisonment, or even violence. Opposition leaders often vanish, activists are targeted, and ordinary citizens live in fear of speaking their minds. The so-called democratic elections in some regions are little more than staged events, manipulated to keep those in power secure in their seats. Citizens demand accountability, but instead they are met with censorship, threats, and sometimes deadly force. The price of this political oppression is not just measured in votes stolen or voices silenced. It is measured in blood, in broken families, and in dreams destroyed. Journalists who try to report the truth often pay the ultimate price. Some are thrown in jail for exposing corruption, others are forced into exile, and many are simply silenced forever. The freedom of speech, a cornerstone of human dignity, remains one of the most fragile rights in Africa today. But beyond the halls of power and politics, it is ordinary people who carry the heaviest burden. In conflict zones scattered across the continent, civilians pay with their lives while leaders wage wars for territory, resources, and dominance. Women and children are often the most vulnerable in these wars. Entire villages are burned, families are separated, and generations are scarred by trauma that will last for decades. The stories emerging from these conflict zones are heartbreaking. Mothers walking for days with their children in search of safety, only to find themselves in overcrowded refugee camps with little food or medical care. Young boys forced into armed groups, their childhood stolen as they are turned into soldiers against their will. Girls facing violence and exploitation in the shadows of war, their innocence destroyed in silence. Each story is a human tragedy, and together they form a dark mosaic of suffering that cannot and must not be ignored. International organizations raise alarms, but the reality on the ground changes slowly. Promises of aid and support often get caught in bureaucracy or corruption, leaving those who need help the most with nothing but empty words. The world watches, sometimes with sympathy, but rarely with decisive action. Meanwhile, people continue to suffer. The powerful carry on with their games of politics, while the powerless bear the scars. As we enter deeper into 2025, the question is no longer whether Africa faces human rights challenges. It is how long the world will remain a spectator to this ongoing crisis. Every headline, every report, every whispered story from those on the ground tells us the same truth: human dignity is under attack. Yet for every story of oppression, there is also a story of resilience. The resilience of people who, despite being crushed by systems of power, continue to survive, to hope, and to resist. This is just the beginning of a deeper exploration into Africa's dark reality of human rights violations. The voices you will hear, the stories we will share, are not meant to depress, but to awaken. They are not meant to divide, but to unite us in a common understanding that humanity cannot progress while so many are left behind in chains of injustice. And so, as Black Voice USA, we begin this journey by shining a light on the first chapter of this story, The reality of conflict zones and the lives of ordinary people trapped in wars they did not start. Their suffering is not their choice, but telling their story is ours. If freedom begins with the right to speak, then censorship is its greatest enemy. In Africa 2025, the silencing of voices has become a weapon of control. Journalists, activists, and ordinary citizens find themselves targeted simply for daring to tell the truth. In countries where corruption runs deep, the press is not seen as a watchdog, it is seen as a threat. Reports of arrests, kidnappings, and even killings of journalists are not rare, they are alarmingly common. Governments pass vague laws against so-called fake news, but these laws are not designed to protect the public from misinformation. Instead, they are crafted to punish those who expose uncomfortable truths. Social media, once a tool for free expression, is increasingly under surveillance. Posts are deleted, accounts are blocked, and in some cases, entire networks are shut down to prevent dissent from spreading. For activists, the danger is even greater. Speaking out against injustice can mean losing your freedom, your family, or even your life. Across the continent, there are countless stories of human rights defenders who have been imprisoned without trial, tortured in secret cells, or forced into exile, leaving behind everything they love. Their only crime is refusing to remain silent. This deliberate silencing does more than stifle dissent. It breeds fear. Ordinary people learn quickly that questioning authority comes at a high cost. A culture of silence begins to dominate, where whispers replace open dialogue and fear replaces hope. When voices are silenced, abuses multiply. Those in power act with impunity, knowing the world will hear little of what happens behind closed doors. Yet the truth has a way of breaking through. Brave journalists continue to risk their lives to report from the ground. Activists use encrypted apps, underground networks, and international platforms to share their stories. Their courage proves that even in the darkest times, the human spirit cannot be completely silenced. But censorship is only one layer of Africa's human rights crisis. Another haunting reality is the plight of refugees and displaced persons. Wars, ethnic conflicts, political instability, and climate change have forced millions to leave their homes. In 2025, refugee camps across the continent are overflowing. The conditions are dire: limited food, scarce medical supplies, and little to no access to education. In these camps, survival is a daily struggle. Families live in makeshift tents, exposed to harsh weather. Children grow up without classrooms, their future stripped away before it even begins. Mothers often sacrifice their own meals so their children can eat, while fathers search endlessly for work in economies that have no room for them. For many, the dream of returning home fades with each passing year. The crisis does not stop at Africa's borders. Many risk their lives crossing dangerous seas or deserts in search of safety, only to face discrimination and hostility when they arrive in foreign lands. The global refugee system, already overwhelmed, often fails to provide the dignity and support these individuals deserve. What is left is a generation growing up in limbo, neither able to go back nor allowed to move forward. Behind these statistics are human beings with names, families, and dreams. A young boy in a camp may dream of becoming a doctor, but without education, that dream remains locked inside him. A mother who once had a career may now spend her days waiting in line for water, her potential wasted. Each refugee is a reminder of both human resilience and the world's failure to protect its most vulnerable. Perhaps one of the most painful issues is the persistent inequality faced by women and girls. Gender-based violence remains widespread, taking many forms: domestic abuse, sexual assault, forced marriage, and denial of basic rights. In some regions, women are treated not as equals but as property, their lives controlled by traditions that deny them autonomy. Education, which should be the key to empowerment, is often out of reach for girls. Some are kept out of school because of poverty, while others are blocked by cultural practices that value boys' education over theirs. Even when girls make it to school, they face challenges ranging from unsafe environments to the constant threat of harassment. The cycle of inequality continues, trapping generations in the same struggles. For women who experience violence, justice is rarely within reach. Laws may exist on paper, but weak enforcement and social stigma keep survivors silent. In many communities, reporting abuse brings shame, not support. The abuser walks free while the survivor carries scars for life. This silent epidemic of gender-based violence is one of the greatest stains on Africa's human rights record. Yet even in this darkness, there is light. Women across the continent are rising as leaders, activists, and voices of change. From organizing grassroots movements to leading political campaigns, they are breaking barriers and demanding justice. Their fight is not only for themselves, but for future generations of girls who deserve to live free from fear. Africa's struggle with censorship, displacement, and gender inequality is not just a regional issue. It is a global one. When voices are silenced, when refugees are abandoned, and when women are denied equality, the world as a whole suffers. The human rights struggle in Africa is a reminder of the universal truth. Dignity and freedom are not privileges, they are rights. And so, the journey of Black Voice USA continues, shining light on these hidden realities. The world must listen, because ignoring these truths is not just an act of indifference, it is complicity. When we talk about the future of Africa, one truth is clear. The children of today are meant to be the leaders of tomorrow. But for millions, that future is being stolen before it even begins. In 2025, child labor and exploitation remain a haunting reality across the continent. Children as young as 5 are forced into labor, working in fields, factories, and even dangerous mines. Instead of learning in classrooms, they spend their days breaking rocks, carrying heavy loads, or harvesting crops for industries that value profit over humanity. The conditions they endure are heartbreaking. Long hours in unsafe environments leave them exhausted and vulnerable to injury. Many of them earn less than a single meal's worth of pay, while the wealth generated by their suffering flows into the pockets of powerful corporations and corrupt systems. These children are not just being robbed of their childhood, they are being robbed of their future. A child who spends years in forced labor is denied the chance to gain the education and skills needed to break free from poverty. Exploitation also takes darker forms. Human trafficking networks prey on the vulnerable, turning children into commodities for forced labor or even sexual exploitation. The very institutions meant to protect them are often too weak or too corrupt to intervene. Each child lost to exploitation is a reminder of a broken system and of a world that has failed its most innocent. Yet, in the midst of this darkness, there are signs of hope. Across Africa, brave activists, community leaders, and organizations are rising to fight back. They expose human rights violations, document abuses, and demand justice in courts and on the streets. Many risk everything to stand against powerful systems, and some pay with their lives. Their courage, however, fuels movements that inspire others to join the fight. Youth activists are also stepping forward, proving that the new generation is unwilling to accept silence. Social media has become a battlefield for truth, where young Africans share their stories and call out injustice to the world. These voices, though often targeted by censorship, refuse to disappear. They remind us that the struggle for human rights is not only about survival, it is about dignity and the dream of a better tomorrow. International solidarity plays a critical role in this fight. Global leaders, human rights organizations, and ordinary citizens across the world cannot afford to remain bystanders. Every time the world ignores an abuse, it gives strength to those who commit it. But every time the world listens, supports, and acts, it offers hope to those fighting for justice. This responsibility does not belong to governments alone. It belongs to all of us, as human beings connected by shared dignity and compassion. Africa's human rights crisis is not just an African problem, it is a global test of our humanity. When children are enslaved by labor, when women are silenced by violence, when refugees are left without a home, the entire world is diminished. Ignoring these realities does not make them disappear, it only deepens the suffering. The fight for human rights in Africa is a reminder that justice anywhere matters everywhere. But the story of Africa is not only one of struggle, it is also one of resilience. For every violation, there are voices demanding change. For every injustice, there are movements rising in defiance. For every act of oppression, there is resistance that refuses to be broken. These stories must be told, not just to expose the darkness, but to celebrate the courage that shines through it. And that is the mission of Black Voice USA: to give voice to the silenced, to stand with the oppressed, and to remind the world that justice is not optional, it is essential. Our commitment is to uncover the hidden truths, amplify the cries for freedom, and demand accountability where it is most needed. As 2025 unfolds, the question we must all ask ourselves is this: will we remain silent while millions suffer, or will we raise our voices and stand on the side of justice? The answer will not only shape the future of Africa, it will shape the future of humanity itself. The dark reality of human rights violations in Africa is undeniable, but so too is the light of resistance. It is up to us, together, to ensure that the voices of the oppressed are not lost in the noise of indifference. We must act, we must speak, and we must stand, because justice delayed is justice denied. This is not just Africa's fight, it is a fight for all of us, a fight for dignity, for freedom, and for a better tomorrow. And here, on Black Voice USA, that fight will always have a voice. This is not the end of the story. This is only the beginning of a fight that demands our voice, our courage, and our unity. Africa's human rights crisis is a reminder that silence helps the oppressor, but raising our voice empowers the oppressed. If these stories moved you, don't let them disappear into the noise. Stand with us. Share this video, spread the message, and become part of the movement for truth and justice. Together, we can make sure that no voice goes unheard and no struggle is forgotten. This is Black Voice USA, where silence ends and truth begins.